Hi, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. At 2 o'clock, we have a keynote, so make sure to go and check that out. And right now, we have Dave Gold from SentinelOne. So welcome, Dave.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, hello, everyone. Hope you can hear me out there. My name's Dave Gold. I'm the America's Field CTO at SentinelOne. And you're all here today to hear more about artificial intelligence. I'm sure it's a topic that you've already heard a lot about over the last few days, but hopefully I can add a little bit of my perspective to that. So clearly, generative AI, it's so hot right now, right? Everyone has their flavor of generative AI. You have OpenAI, ChatGPT, which Microsoft's invested in. You have Google Bard, right, the Palm 2 LLM. Facebook has their Meta platform, Anthropic, and these are just some of the big ones, but everybody has their flavor of LLM out there, right? And if we look at artificial intelligence, right, I think a lot of people are saying, is this going to be the next industrial revolution? If you look at industrial revolutions, they all were technological innovations that changed the way that people work, right? So the first one was really around steam power, mechanization. The second one was really around energy and mass production, factories. The third industrial revolution was around compute and automation, manufacturing, supply chain, et cetera. The one that we are currently in, that most people say we're in the fourth industrial revolution, was really around robotization, cyber physical systems, connected devices, mobile phones, et cetera. But I would say that I think there's an opportunity here for artificial intelligence to really be that fifth industrial revolution, where we really can take AI and we can really make humans and robots and AI work closely together to make humans even more efficient. But when we talk about AI and LLMs, like generative AI, ChatGPT, et cetera, like LLMs and AI, LLM is a large language model. It's one part of artificial intelligence. And LLMs are really good at things like prompt engineering, where you can ask it questions. It really understands languages really well, large language model, right? They require like a lot of reinforcement from humans to be able to say, hey, this is right, this is wrong. They're good at correlation, but they don't necessarily have reasoning. You can train them on rules. But if you really think about artificial intelligence has to be autonomous, has to think and act like a human. And a large language model doesn't really think and act like a human. It's not necessarily creating things that don't already exist, but essentially it's learning from things that already exist and can search large amounts of data very quickly. But there's a lot of challenges with these models too around what data do you train it on, junk in, junk out. I remember a funny story a few years ago. Someone came out with an AI model that they trained on the public internet, like Twitter, and it became racist and really discriminatory in like 5 minutes. So you got to be very careful about what data you're training these models on. So just some data points about the industry, because I'm a big data guy. I like to think about what are the challenges of our industry and what's the data to support that. I think it comes as no surprise that we have a huge talent shortage of security professionals. ISC Squared says we have 3.4 million people that we need to hire in this industry that we can't hire for today. If you look at companies, probably some of your own organizations, 76% of the organizations out there have budget prioritized for AL/ML. So this is something on the minds of every board member, every executive, about how are we embracing artificial intelligence, machine learning to transform our business. If you look at actually the people doing the security analyst job, they struggle, right? They struggle with lack of context. They struggle with lack of enterprise-wide visibility. They struggle with stress and anxiety. This is not an easy job. So you think about, we don't have enough people, and this is a really stressful job where you have a lot of tools and a lot of data. Just the amount of data created in the world, we're up to 79 zettabytes, right? Like, I mean, how many zeros and commas are in a zettabyte? It's a lot, right? But the amount of data being created, they've said, just in the last 3 years, we've created more data than in all of human history previously, right? So just the amount of data out there, we don't have enough humans to look at all this data, and we have more data than ever. And even just in our own environments, right? The average, security team has close to 4.5 or 4.5 thousand alerts per day. So I look at AI and ML, and I really tried to think about 5 ways that I think that AI and machine learning can really change cybersecurity and hopefully make all of our jobs easier in this industry. And the first one, I think, is probably the one that's been embraced for the longest, which is looking at behavioral and anomaly-based detection. There's been technologies out there, Sentinel-1 included, that looks at the behaviors to be able to detect threats. So I'd say about a decade ago, we moved beyond just looking at signatures to detect threats, where we looked for the known, to more anomaly and behavioral-based detections. And this was, I think, a really powerful transformation, and was really kind of the first step into machine learning, which is really what's behind most artificial intelligence today. And it was really good at detecting anomalies, more things like predictive analysis, looking at malicious behaviors, et cetera. But the challenge with a lot of these technologies was, how do we detect an odd behavior or an anomaly, and how do we differentiate that from being a good or bad behavior and anomaly? And I think that's really the challenge. A lot of these solutions, when they first came out, really struggled from the false positives. Just because something's a change in a behavior, or just because something's an anomaly in our environments, doesn't necessarily make it malicious, right? And so the way that AI or ML can determine if this is a malicious anomaly or a good change, is by adding more additional context and more data. So the more data we can add to these models, the more information that it can feed in, the more correlation we can have between these behaviors and these anomalies, the higher efficiency we'll get in those detections. But these technologies are really good at detecting those 0 days, real-time protection, et cetera. I think the second main area for generative AI is around threat hunting. Threat hunting today is around hypothesis testing, but it requires a human to know, what should I actually go look for? What are my hypotheses for how my organization could be exploited, how it could be attacked? What are the risks to my organization? What are the attacks out there? What are the landscapes? What are their TTPs? And it requires a lot of research. Then an analyst has to take that hypothesis and transform that into a query, where they have to know the query language, they have to know the data that they have to know the data they're looking at, they have to build correlations. What if they could just come in and say, hey, system, in plain English, have we been impacted by log4j? Wouldn't that be great? Like, how much time would that save? The analyst doesn't have to go research log4j, they don't have to know what logs they have, they don't have to know what the vulnerability is, they don't have to look at the TTPs, they can just go ask, in a way that their boss is likely asking them, right? I'm sure our security teams, their bosses come and say, hey, I saw something on the news, have we been impacted by it? That could be a couple-day research project to go answer that question. But what if in just plain English we can ask a generative AI model to go do that, where it does the research, where it does the queries, where it summarizes the results and feeds it back? So I think that AI can be hugely transformative when it comes to threat hunting. The next part of it is around intelligent automation. SOAR and automation technologies have been obviously adopted for the last few years, and organizations continue to look at it. But how do we automate those tier 1 incidents, the things that our analysts are having to triage all of those alerts every day? And automation has a huge opportunity to add efficiencies to our teams. But I think AI and ML can actually add a layer on top of automation. It's one thing to automate the workflows, but if you can actually put an AI or ML engine on top of those workflows, we actually can have some intelligence that's informed by data that can say, you know what, I'm going to take this automation because I've already done the analysis of this alert and I've confirmed that it's a true positive, so I'm going to go and actually remediate and take that automation. Today, automation is hard to really be automatic because usually a human has to come in and say, is this real? Now kick off the automation, right? And you're not really being proactive. It still requires a human to come look at every alert and then kick those things off. I think there's also huge opportunities for ML around IOC extraction. If we look at detections in our environment, well, the ML engine can go grab all those IOCs and then add them back to the platform automatically, right? We can use the machines for that type of thing. Threat intel sharing, right? I mean, we're at MWise here. Threat intel is hugely valuable, but it gets stale very quickly. But if we can feed that threat intel into an automated system where an ML engine can just go search for that stuff in near real time, then we can get the value out of that threat intel much faster, and we can share that across our tools as well. The fourth area is really around vulnerability management. ML and AI engines can analyze lots of factors in our environments very quickly, and things that humans take a lot of time to do. So things like asset inventories, risk scoring, understanding context. If we can train these models on this stuff, we can actually understand our most vulnerable assets. We can actually do breach risk prediction. And we can actually do things like penetration testing and stuff as well. Rather than having to hire expensive red teams, what if we train these AI engines to actually try to break into our networks continuously? And what if we help make these AI engines understand the most critical systems and actually help in our patching as well? I think we can really improve the vulnerability management process. And the fifth big benefit is really around incident response. And this is really that tier 1 triage, where if an event fires, and we all have alert fatigue in our environments, and we don't have enough people to look at those alerts. But what if we can train the engine to actually go do that tier 1 analysis, where it can prioritize alerts, where it can identify false positives, and we can actually use LLMs to improve our incident response, where we can reduce costs, increase accuracy, add context automatically, improve visibility, improve relationships, correlations. I think we can really change the way that we respond to events. But all of this is going to really require the right amount of data and the right models being trained to be able to do these types of behaviors. So obviously I talked about 5 good things, I think, for AI ML, but I think that there's also going to be some serious challenges that we as an industry need to figure out. And this is very much an open discussion, I think, in the industry. And the first one I would say is around privacy and security. We get this a lot, right? And I'm sure your organizations are struggling with this already. ChatGPT, right? Beginning of the year, probably everyone in our organization was like, this is amazing. It can write emails, it can write code, it can do all this amazing stuff. And employees just started using it, right? Without thinking about the data they were putting into it, the questions they were asking, right? So that's obviously a real risk. The other part of it is what data is being used to train these models. Is that private data that belongs to us as people, right? Is that being trained on personal or company information, intellectual property? And will these technologies actually be used for more surveillance and monitoring as well, right? Because rather than a human looking at all this data, you can actually have a machine use it as well. And how is it going to be used in law enforcement and stuff as well? So there's a lot of this that is definitely going into the privacy aspect of these engines. The other challenge is around bias and discrimination. Back to that point around when they trained a model on Twitter, it got racist, right? It's all, it depends if there's bias or any discrimination in your data, it's going to actually learn that stuff, and it's going to add that as well to its findings. Then really around security, attackers are actually looking at, if these models are learning from data that's out there, can they actually poison the models to basically circumvent these detections, or even data theft as well, as people put data into the models. The second concern is, guess what? The attackers are using AI and ML to attack us as well, right? In fact, they might even be ahead of us because they can be very innovative because they don't have the big machine of our companies all behind us, right? So one way that they're using AI ML is AI-powered bots. They're actually using bots out there to scan for vulnerabilities in our networks. When they find a vulnerability, they will automatically exploit it, and they will automatically execute code to do things like ransomware on the systems. And this can be fully automated. So one person can basically attack hundreds of companies in a very automated way. And there's actually platforms out there, like ransomware as a service, where you don't even have to build these automations. They just exist, and you can go pay $50 to go use it. The others are around automated phishing, right? We've all gotten those phishing attacks that are so clearly written by someone who doesn't speak our language, or were written by a machine, and they're just terrible, right? They're spam immediately. The spam filters can detect them as well. But because of these LLMs are trained on human language and to sound and talk like humans, they actually can now train these engines, attackers can, to write emails that can bypass phishing type emails. And they can actually train them to bypass these systems because they sound human and they sound personal. And they can even do targeted spear phishing attacks that can actually go out there and learn about the person that they're attacking, all their information they post on social media, on LinkedIn, et cetera, to add that context to make it a very targeted phishing attack just for that person. And they can just have the model completely do that. Malware, AI models can write code. Right? And yes, they all claim that they're not allowing you to write malicious code, but what if you ask this engine to write me a bit of code that does something malicious? It's lowering the barriers of entry to an attack. Deepfakes is another big area. We've heard a lot of these social engineering attacks. There's a big one in Las Vegas going on last few weeks with the casinos, where essentially someone called into the IT help desk and changed their multi-factor auth source. Imagine now a deep fake where they can actually call in and sound or even look on video like the person calling in. They could actually train these models on somebody's voice. I do public speaking a lot. My voice is out there. They could train a model to talk exactly like me and sound exactly like me on the phone. So even if it called somebody who knew me, they'd be like, yep, that's Dave. Let's change his password and all of his credentials. And so it's going to become tough, I think, to even imagine now those emails where it's like, hey, it's your CEO, you need to wire $30 million ASAP, because our CEOs do that all the time. What if that was a video or a FaceTime that came in where we see our CEO's voice asking us to do that? We might be more likely to actually follow through, but that could totally be a deepfake. And then, of course, the data poisoning. How do we confuse defenses? Attackers are always trying to feed data to basically confuse our models so that it can't actually detect those types of things. The next challenge is around regulatory uncertainty. All of these models, the governments are trying to figure out how to regulate these. So in the US, they actually just published an AI Bill of Rights. Might be something to go look at and read. But it's really around how do we safely and effectively implement AI and ML in our organizations. Obviously, the European Union, they're big advocates for privacy. And so they are starting to build an act around how social engineering can be used. What data can be used to train these models. The UK, who decided to leave the EU, of course, wrote their own. And even China has policies now around transparency, deepfakes, how this stuff can be used within China. Okay, the fourth one is around cost. While these models are really great, they're large language models, meaning there's a lot of compute and a lot of data that goes into building and training these models and using these. And so while we see a lot of potential opportunity for this, if you were building these own capabilities for your company, it's really expensive. And even if you're licensing one of the public engines that's out there, they're going to be expensive, right? And so I think that we're going to have to look at how we use these models. At SentinelOne, we think a lot about maybe we don't need one large language model for everything, but what if we have 10 smaller models that can be used for lots of different types of queries? We can be way more efficient with the costs of each of those things. And so I think cost is going to be a big factor here. All these vendors talking about their AI ML, how much is that actually going to cost? And hopefully it's saving a lot of man hours that we can justify that cost. But these things aren't cheap. It's a lot of compute. It's a lot of data that has to be trained on them. And the fifth one is around accuracy. I think we've all heard about the hallucinations, right? Where the ChatGPT will confidently tell you something that is completely made up and is not at all true, but it will say it like it's fact. This can really happen from a variety of things, but it's all trained on human data. I often say that ChatGPT has the overconfidence of maybe a white male out there, right? It's been trained on a lot of that data. But really, to do automation and threat detection around this, we need a highly accurate model. So we have to put those guardrails in place to make sure that there's no hallucinations, that we have really high confidence in the things that the models are outputting. So what's next, right? Obviously, we've all seen Terminator and Skynet, where the machines take over and kill all the humans. I don't think that's what's next. At SentinelOne, we had just announced our Purple AI engine. Really, this is designed as a simple interface where you can just ask questions of your data. It'll automatically build your queries. It'll automatically summarize all the results. It'll actually make suggestions for automated response actions. And it will guide analysts through threat hunting. But this is designed to totally improve and change the security operations experience. There's a lot of vendors talking about this stuff. I think one of the reasons, our approaches, are maybe different. We have one data platform for all of our data that's very flexible. We can pull lots of different types of data into it in a very cost-effective way. We're building integrations and partnerships with a lot of the vendors who are in this room. And we've taken a security-first approach to this around trust and privacy. We're not training any of our models on customer data, customer information, et cetera. So we're trying to be very conscious of all of those challenges as we build these technologies. So I just highlight this not as a pitch for SentinelOne, but just to say there's a lot of types of technologies out there that are taking these approaches. So in your environment, how to start your AI journey, I think you got to identify the right data platform, the right data. Select the right use cases for automation and AI and be very clear with what value you want to get out of these. I think collaborating on threat intel is a great place to start. Think about automation, and really start training your cyber analysts to be AI ready, and even build a governance program around AI. So I'd really suggest all of these things as ways of doing that. Will AIs replace humans in cybersecurity? I don't think so. I think just like any industrial revolution, humans are going to have to evolve to a more skilled set of skills, right? They can't just triage alerts anymore, but they got to be able to be that tier 2 or tier 3 analyst. But because we have a shortage of 3 million people, we really just need humans to shift that focus. And it's really going to come to human and machine teaming. We really need the humans and the AI models to work together to drive efficiencies, just like in a lot of other industrial revolutions. So finally, just to summarize here, I think AI holds immense potential for defending as well as attacking our environments. I think that we have the potential here to really enhance cybersecurity, and we've been talking about this in the industry for a long time, but I think we're finally there with the technologies and the cloud and the data and the things that we need to be able to deliver this. But I think it's really important for you to build kind of that holistic approach where you think about how humans and how AI is going to work together for your organization, and to really stay vigilant around these technologies and the risks to your environment. So I think I'm at time now. If you do have any questions, I'll hang around after the talk. Please come up and talk to me. From these conferences, I love learning from you, and I love getting feedback from you. So any ideas that you have, any thoughts, any questions, please come talk to me. Dave Gold with SentinelOne. So really appreciate your time. I know there's a keynote that you can all get to, but thank you so much.